Hey guys, welcome to the new channel. Thanks so much for checking us out. My name is Dev and I'm a huge fan of practical effects in movies. CGI has come a long way since stuff like the Scorpion King, but I was glad to hear Alien Covenant would use practical effects to portray the Xenomorph. Some of the sickest effects ever came from the first two Alien films, so let's take a closer look at the magic behind the scenes, starting with Alien. Before we get into the Xenomorph, we've got to talk about some of the other amazing stuff in Alien, like the eggs. The eggs were made out of see-through fiberglass, and director Ridley Scott wanted to see some movement inside. The eggs themselves were hung from the ceiling with gobs of KY jelly dripping down. When the shot was flipped upside down, it created the impossible effect of slime flowing upward. The crew stuffed real cattle hearts and stomachs inside the eggs, and Ridley Scott himself stuck his hand inside to create movement. When he did this, it looked like the facehugger was writhing around inside. They used a lot of genuine internal organs on Alien. When Ash is dissecting the facehugger, its guts are made of shellfish, oysters, and sheep kidney. And the chest burster scene practically used a whole butcher shop. Which brings us to the chest burster. It's a well-known story that the cast didn't know what was going on. They had vague description but didn't know any specifics. When they noticed the huge stinking vat of kidneys and livers and intestines on set, they started to get the idea. The chest burster itself was basically a little puppet on the end of a rod. Originally, they wanted to have little tiny arms, but they never worked. Actor John Hurt was hiding below the table with his head, shoulders, and arms stuck through a hole. He was blended with a fake torso that was packed with all the smelly guts from before. Everybody but the cast was covered in tarps and raincoats like the splash zone of SeaWorld. When the alien punches through Hurt's chest, they used compressed air to blast the entire room with real gore. The actors were shocked by the splatter. Veronica Cartwright, who played Lambert, actually collapsed on the floor screaming and crying. It's one of the most terrifying, visceral moments in movie history, and it set the stage for the real main event, the Xenomorph. H.R. Giger's immortal design for the alien was tough to bring to life. For starters, Ridley Scott had a hard time finding someone to wear the actual alien suit. He originally wanted to cast a woman, but they couldn't find any tall enough. Most men they tried out didn't work either, including Peter Mayhew, Chewie. But Ridley Scott finally found his alien in Nigerian artist Balaji Badejo. Balaji was 7 feet tall with long, skinny limbs and graceful movements. He was everything Scott had envisioned for his ultimate organism. Now that they had their actor, the crew needed to actually build the Xenomorph. When other effects artists had a hard time interpreting his freaky biomechanical design, Giger decided to sculpt the suit himself. To create all the tiny little details, Giger used every material available to him, from plaster and clay to pipes and bottle caps. There are macaroni pieces, oysters, parts of a Rolls Royce, and tons of actual bones. He used ripped up condoms to make the Xeno's stretchy jaws. Giger even incorporated a real human skull in an alien's head. You can see it under the clear dome. The suit was coming together nicely, but there were still some roadblocks. Originally, Giger wanted the Xenomorph's entire body to be transparent. The idea was that you'd be able to see its organs, skeleton, and even the vague shape of Balaji inside. But the clear material was way too brittle to actually use. They gave up on the idea after a couple weeks, but Ridley Scott eventually got his translucent aliens in Prometheus. Scott also tried lining the interior of the alien's head with live maggots so you could see them crawling around inside. Unfortunately, the maggots fell asleep under the hot studio lights and just laid there like spaghetti. To make his head move, Scott hired Italian master builder Carlo Rambaldi. He built the 70s King Kong, which was the largest movie robot ever at 40 feet tall. And later, he'd go on to design this little guy. Rambaldi used a series of 9 cables, kind of like bicycle brakes, that ran through the alien's head down its back. The cables ran through a wooden panel 7 meters away where a technician controlled the movements. It took the hard work of a lot of talented people to bring the alien to life, and the movie won a well-deserved Oscar for the best visual effects.
I'm very happy to have this. Thank you very much.
7 years later, James Cameron would try to top it with Aliens. Aliens is a masterclass in practical effects. Cameron's last movie, The Terminator, showed what he could do with a limited budget, and even with 3 times as much money for Aliens, he still had to stretch it. Before he went all in on the blue CGI people, Cameron learned the art of filmmaking from Z-movie icon Roger Corman. Aliens had way more money behind it than most of Corman's schlock, but Cameron's mentor taught him all about getting the biggest bang for his buck. See all these hypersleep pods? They only had enough money to build 6 of them, but Cameron used mirrors and camera angles to make it look like there were 12. Kinda how Spielberg made the warehouse at the end of Raiders seem so massive. So Cameron was a big fan of Giger's design from the first film, but he wanted to make some changes for Aliens. Since there would be more Xenomorphs in the sequel, the design needed to be streamlined for efficiency. Cameron decided not to go with a full rubber suit for his aliens. He tried on an old costume himself and saw how impossible it was to move in. The new Xenomorph needed to run, jump, and swarm, which wasn't happening inside this stiff latex. Instead, Cameron dressed his alien actors in black spandex bodysuits with molded pieces glued on top. It gave the dancers and acrobats who played the aliens all the mobility they needed, and Cameron was able to use light and shadow to hide the less intricate costumes. For the scenes where the Xenomorphs got shot and/or exploded in gooey chunks, Stan Winston created 8-foot-tall puppets. Cameron also got rid of the smooth dome on the aliens' heads. He didn't want to worry about it cracking during the intense stunts he planned, so he nixed it all together and went for a ridged look instead. Aliens also won the Oscar for visual effects, and one look at the humongous alien queen will tell you why. Long live the queen. She's a killer mix between Giger's dark biomechanical aesthetic and Cameron's own style. The queen is big, terrifying, fast, and feminine. The crew knew they had an awesome design, they just had to figure out how to make her work. Cameron originally wanted a mixture of puppet and stop motion animation like the T-800 in the first Terminator. Jerky stop motion worked fine for the robotic exoskeleton, but Cameron worried it wouldn't convey the graceful power of his queen. Not to mention, all the smoke and steam effects in the queen's lair would be a pain in the ass to work with in stop motion. Instead, Cameron opted for a full-scale puppet for most of the shots of the queen. It was 14 feet tall, with 2 puppeteers inside controlling her arms and a dozen more technicians behind the scenes controlling her head. The puppet was so huge it needed a crane to support its body, but Cameron expertly managed to hide it from the camera. He did the same thing with Ripley's power loader too. The full-size bodysuit weighed 600 pounds and it needed a stuntman standing behind it to move the arms and legs. For scenes where Ripley and the Queen battle, they used miniature puppets for the wide shots. And with some clever editing, the effect is pretty seamless. Not all practical effects are as effective as the ones in Alien and Aliens. And listen, I've got nothing against CGI when it's used correctly, but I'll always have a soft spot for the bloody brilliance behind the practical effects in these incredible movies.